My hands were shaking so badly. I couldn't even hold my champagne glass, and my husband looked me straight in the eye and told me to disappear before I embarrassed him. That's the night I understood I had spent 6 years married to a man who saw me as a costume he wore for other people. My name is Alina Marsh. I was 31 years old the night my marriage ended in front of 300 witnesses, under a ceiling of crystal chandeliers, in a ballroom my own father had built with 40 years of his life's work. Nobody in that room knew what was coming. I didn't know either. I only knew that something felt wrong the moment we walked through those doors, wrong in a way I couldn't name yet, wrong the way the air feels before a storm breaks. I want to tell you what happened, not because I need sympathy, because somewhere out there, someone is standing exactly where I stood, smiling in a dress that doesn't fit the way her marriage doesn't fit, and she needs to know what I didn't know then. That the storm isn't always the end of you. Sometimes it's the thing that finally lets you breathe. Let me take you back to the beginning of that night, before everything came apart. The gala was called Marsh and Low Legacy, 30 years of my father's architecture firm, celebrated in the very hotel his company had designed downtown. I'd grown up watching my father, Richard Marsh, build that company from a rented office with 2 drafting tables into one of the most respected firms on the East Coast. He never talked much about pride. He didn't have to. You could see it in the way he walked into a room he designed, quiet and certain, like the walls themselves recognized him. I married Daniel Cole 5 years after I graduated. He was charming in the way that charming men learn to be: practiced, smooth, always saying the exact thing a room wanted to hear. My father never fully warmed to him, though he never said why outright. He just watched Daniel work a crowd and go quiet afterward, the way you go quiet when you've noticed something you're not ready to say out loud. I used to think that quiet was disapproval. Now I think it was worry. That night, I wore a navy dress my father had picked out himself. He'd taken me shopping 2 weeks earlier, insisting I needed something for, and I remember his exact words, "A night that matters." I laughed at the time. I thought he meant the anniversary of the firm. I didn't understand yet that he'd been planning something else entirely, something he hadn't told me, something that would change both our lives. Daniel was distracted the whole drive to the hotel. He kept checking his phone, thumb moving fast over the screen, jaw tight. "Everything okay?" I asked him. "Fine," he said, not looking up. "Work stuff." I believed him. That's the part that still stings when I think back on it. How easily I believed him. How many years of easily believing him had trained me not to look too closely at the cracks. The gala was beautiful. String quartet in the corner, waiters gliding between tables with trays of champagne, my father's name lit up in gold letters above the stage. I remember feeling proud, genuinely proud, watching him shake hands with men who doubted him 30 years ago and now called him a legend. And then I saw her. She was standing near the bar in a red dress, laughing at something a man beside her said, tossing her hair back in that particular way people do when they know they're being watched. I didn't think anything of it. Not yet. It was Daniel's reaction that made me look twice. The way his whole body seemed to straighten, the way his hand found the small of my back and started, gently, insistently, guiding me toward the opposite side of the room. "Let's get a drink," he said, too fast, too bright. "Daniel, the bar's right there. There's another one upstairs, better view." I stopped walking. I want you to understand, I wasn't a suspicious woman. I wasn't the kind of wife who searched phones or counted hours. I had given this man the benefit of every doubt for 6 years, but something in his voice that night had a thread of panic in it, thin and taut, like a wire about to snap. "Who is that?" I asked, nodding toward the woman in red. "Nobody, client's assistant, I think." His eyes wouldn't hold mine. "Come on, your dad's about to give the toast, we should." "You're sweating." He wiped his forehead like it embarrassed him and laughed, a short, hollow sound. "It's hot in here." It wasn't hot. The room was cold enough that I'd seen 2 women reach for shawls. I let him lead me away anyway, because some small, tired part of me didn't want to know yet. Isn't that strange? How we can feel the truth standing right there and still choose to look away from it a little longer, just to keep the night intact. We made it almost to the stairs when a voice called out behind us. Bright, familiar, entirely too comfortable. Daniel. He froze. I felt it happen under my hand, the sudden rigidity in his arm, like a man who'd heard a gunshot. The woman in red crossed the room toward us, heels clicking against marble, a smile on her face that didn't match the tension radiating off my husband. She was younger than me, maybe by 5 or 6 years, with the kind of effortless beauty that made you understand immediately why a certain type of man might lose his mind over her. "I thought that was you," she said, stopping in front of us, eyes flicking to me with something I couldn't read yet, curiosity maybe, or cruelty dressed up as curiosity. "You didn't tell me you'd be here tonight." "Sophia," Daniel's voice cracked on her name. "This isn't a good time." "Oh," she looked at me properly now, taking in the navy dress, the wedding ring, doing the math in real time. Something shifted in her expression, not embarrassment. Amusement. "You must be Alina." The sound of my own name in her mouth felt like a slap. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. "Do we know each other?" "We haven't officially met." She extended a hand I did not take. "Daniel talks about you sometimes." Daniel grabbed my arm hard enough that I gasped. "Alina, let's go please, we're causing a scene." "We're not causing anything," I said, my voice strange to my own ears, too calm, too quiet. "She just said you talk about me, to her. Daniel, why would you be talking about your wife to a woman I've never met in my life?" The music from the quartet felt very far away suddenly. I remember the specific, absurd detail of noticing a waiter behind Daniel's shoulder, frozen mid-step with a tray of champagne, clearly sensing what the rest of the room hadn't caught on to yet. "Can we not do this here?" Daniel said, and it wasn't a question. It was a demand, low and sharp, his fingers still closed around my wrist like he could physically drag the truth back into hiding. "Your father is about to speak. Do you want to embarrass him? Is that what you want?" And there it was, the exact moment something inside me went very, very still. 6 years of marriage and his very first instinct, standing in front of the woman he was clearly involved with, was to worry about my father's reputation. Not my heart, not the truth, just the optics. "Let go of me," I said. "Alina." "Let go." He didn't let go gently. He pulled me sideways, away from Sophia, away from the growing cluster of guests who'd begun to notice the tension crackling in that corner of the room, and his voice dropped into something low and furious, something I had genuinely never heard from him before. "You are not doing this tonight," he hissed. "Not here, not in front of everyone your father invited. Walk with me to the terrace and we'll talk like adults." "Like adults," I repeated. "You mean quietly, you mean where no one can see you." "Alina, please." "Is she the reason you've been working late, every night for 2 months?" His silence answered before his mouth could. I felt the ground tilt slightly beneath me, the particular vertigo of watching your whole life rearrange itself in real time. I thought about the missed calls he said were clients. The hotel key card I found in his jacket and didn't ask about because I trusted him. The way he'd started showering the second he got home, before he'd even say hello to me. I hadn't wanted to see it, and now I couldn't stop seeing it. "Alina," his grip tightened again, and this time there was something almost desperate in it, something that had stopped being about love and started being about control. "You need to go home, right now. Take a cab, I'll explain everything later, just not here, please." "You're asking me to leave," I said slowly, testing the words, "so that you can stay with her at my father's gala." "That's not." "You're protecting her, Daniel, in front of everyone." Somewhere behind us, the microphone on stage let out a soft feedback whine, and I heard the MC's voice announcing that Richard Marsh would now say a few words. My father's name, echoing across a ballroom he built, while my husband gripped my arm hard enough to leave a mark and begged me to disappear so his mistress wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable. I looked past Daniel's shoulder and saw my father walking toward the stage, tall, silver-haired, composed in the way he always was in public. And then, for just a second, his eyes swept the room and landed on us. On my face. On Daniel's hand around my wrist. I watched something change in my father's expression. something I had only seen once before in my life, the night our family dog died, and he'd had to be the one to tell me. A terrible, quiet stillness. He did not walk to the podium. He walked toward us. My father crossed that ballroom like the 30 years of noise and applause simply didn't exist anymore. Like there was only one thing left in the world worth walking toward, and it was me. He didn't raise his voice. That was the terrifying part. Richard Marsh had built an empire out of quiet certainty, and he brought that same quiet with him now, moving through his own gala with a stillness that made people instinctively step out of his way. "Daniel," he said, stopping in front of us, "let go of my daughter's arm." Daniel's grip loosened immediately, guiltily, like a child caught with his hand somewhere it shouldn't be. "Richard, this isn't, we were just having a private conversation. It's nothing." It didn't look like nothing. My father's eyes moved to me. "Elena, are you all right?" I opened my mouth to say I was fine, the way I'd said I was fine for years, the way women say fine when they mean the opposite and hope someone will hear the difference. But my throat closed around the word. Nothing came out except a single shaking breath. My father looked at my face for exactly 2 seconds. Then he looked at Sophia, standing a few feet away with her arms crossed, watching the unraveling with an expression that had finally shifted into something like alarm. He didn't need me to explain. He'd already understood. "Everyone," my father said, and though his voice wasn't loud, the room had already gone quiet around us, the way rooms do when they sense something real is happening, something that isn't part of the program. He turned, slow and deliberate, toward the small crowd that had gathered near the stage waiting for his toast. "I apologize. I'm going to need a few more minutes before I come up." A ripple of confused murmurs. Someone laughed nervously, unsure if this was a bit. It wasn't a bit. My father turned back to Daniel, and for the first time in 6 years, I watched him speak to my husband without a single trace of politeness, dressing up his words. "How long?" It wasn't a question, it was a demand. "Richard, I don't think this is the place." "I built this place," my father said. "Every wall, every beam, every light fixture in this room exists because I put it there. So I will decide what the place is for tonight. How long has this been going on?" Daniel's mouth opened and closed. Sophia, to her credit or perhaps just her self-preservation, stepped backward, melting quietly into the crowd like she'd never been part of the scene at all. "4 months," Daniel finally said, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. It's complicated, Richard. Marriages go through things. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." My father's voice had dropped even lower now, and somehow that made it worse. "You brought your mistress to my company's gala. You stood in front of my daughter and told her to leave so she wouldn't embarrass you, in my building, with my name on the wall behind you." I stood there between them, feeling strangely like a spectator at my own execution, watching 2 men decide the shape of a truth I'd already felt breaking inside my chest for the last 10 minutes. But something in my father's fury cracked something open in me too. I found my voice again, thin but steady. "4 months," I repeated, looking at Daniel. "We went to my cousin's wedding 4 months ago. You danced with me. You told me you loved me in the car on the way home." "Elena, was that true? Or was that just what you said because it was easier than telling me the truth?" He didn't answer. Of course he didn't answer. Men like Daniel never answer the questions that actually matter. They only answer the ones that let them manage the damage. My father put a hand on my shoulder, and I felt something in me that had been holding rigid for the past 10 minutes finally allow itself to soften. Just slightly, just enough to remember that I wasn't standing there alone. "Go with your mother," he said gently. "She's by the east doors. I'll handle this." "Dad, you don't have to give a speech tonight. We can just—" "I'm not worried about the speech." His eyes, when they met mine, were the same steady gray they'd been my whole life, except now there was something fierce burning behind them, something I hadn't seen since I was a teenager and a boy at school had made me cry and my father had shown up at the principal's office within the hour. "I'm worried about you. Go find your mother. I need 5 minutes." I don't know exactly what was said in those 5 minutes. I only know that by the time I found my mother at the east doors, already moving toward me with her arms open, because she'd somehow sensed something was wrong before anyone told her, the entire tone of the ballroom had shifted. Guests whispering behind champagne flutes. Heads turning toward the corner where my father stood, still speaking low and hard to a husband who looked, for the first time in the years I'd known him, genuinely afraid. My mother held me while I shook, her hand moving in slow circles on my back the way she used to when I was small and had nightmares. "Whatever happened," she murmured into my hair, "whatever it is, you are not going to face it alone. Do you understand me? Not for one single second." I didn't have words yet. I just nodded and let myself cry quietly into her shoulder while 300 guests pretended not to watch. My father returned to the podium 20 minutes later. He walked up those 3 small steps like nothing at all had happened, straightened his jacket, and looked out over the crowd with the composure of a man who had spent 30 years learning how to hold a room steady, even when his own world was breaking. "Thank you for your patience," he began. "I had a personal matter to attend to. Family, as it turns out, doesn't wait for convenient timing." A soft, uncertain laugh rippled through the crowd, the kind people offer when they're not sure if laughing is allowed. He talked about the firm for a few minutes, thanked his partners, thanked the team that had built the tower behind him from a sketch on a napkin 30 years ago. And then, near the end, his eyes found me across the room, and his voice changed, dropped into something quieter, more personal. "I want to say one more thing," he said, "and I hope you'll indulge an old man for it. 30 years ago, I built this company because I believed that if you build something honestly, brick by brick, without shortcuts, without pretending to be something you're not, it will stand. It will hold weight. It will still be standing long after the people who doubted you have forgotten your name." He paused. The room had gone completely silent. "That's true of buildings," he continued. "And it's true of people, too. Tonight I was reminded that not everyone builds their life the same way. Some people build on shortcuts, on lies dressed up as love, on foundations that look solid from a distance but can't hold any real weight at all." His eyes moved briefly, unmistakably, to where Daniel stood frozen near the bar, before returning to me. "To my daughter, I am prouder of you tonight than I have been in a very long time. Not because tonight was easy, because you didn't pretend it was fine when it wasn't. That takes more courage than most people in this room will ever understand." I don't remember deciding to cry again. I just remember the tears falling and my mother's hand finding mine, and a strange, unfamiliar warmth spreading through the center of my chest. Something that felt, impossibly, like relief. Daniel left the gala alone that night. Nobody stopped him. Nobody needed to. The weeks that followed were not easy. I won't pretend they were some cinematic montage of instant healing. There were nights I sat on my bathroom floor at 2 in the morning, staring at old photographs, wondering how I had missed 4 months of lies stacked quietly beneath a marriage I thought was simply tired, not broken. There was the humiliation of explaining to friends, the pity in some eyes, the poorly disguised curiosity in others. There was the paperwork, the division of a life into boxes and folders, the strange grief of mourning someone who was still very much alive. But there was also this, my father, showing up at my apartment every single Sunday with takeout containers and terrible reality television, refusing to let me sit in silence for too long. My mother, teaching me how to laugh again in small doses, the way you reteach a muscle after an injury. And slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice it happening myself, coming back. Not the woman I was before Daniel, someone new. Someone who had learned, in the most public and painful way possible, exactly what she would no longer accept. 6 months later, I ran into Sophia at a coffee shop near my old apartment. She looked different, tired, thinner, none of the easy confidence she'd worn like armor at the gala. She told me, unprompted in the awkward way strangers confess things to each other when guilt has nowhere else to go, that Daniel had done the same thing to her eventually. Different woman, same lies, same panic in his voice when he got caught. I didn't feel triumphant hearing that. I felt something quieter. Sad, mostly. Sad for her, sad for the version of myself that had once believed his voice when it cracked with what I thought was love, and turned out to only ever be the sound of a man protecting himself. I think about that night often, the chandeliers, the silence that fell over 300 people, my father crossing a room he built to stand beside the daughter he loved more than his own reputation. I think about how frightened I was in that moment, how certain I was that my whole life was ending. It was, just not the way I thought. Because what ended that night wasn't me. It was the version of my life built on pretending, on small silences, on believing that keeping the peace was more important than telling the truth. What survived, what walked out of that ballroom, shaking but upright, was someone stronger than I ever gave myself credit for being. My father always told me that a foundation built on honesty can hold almost any weight. I didn't understand what he meant until the night my marriage collapsed in front of everyone, and instead of falling with it, I found I was still standing. Still here, still whole, finally, unmistakably myself again.